the project a little bit. The design review, I just want you guys to understand what it is that you have to do and work towards that instead of the garbage I usually get. I do this every semester, so because if I just tell you do nothing but what I already told you, I get a lot of garbage. So it's time to make sure you know what you need to do. So we're gonna talk about JavaScript today. We cannot do Angular without JavaScript. However, 90% of the JavaScript we're gonna learn is relatively simple. There's not like the hardcore programming in the sense that we might have had with the backend stuff. We will have to program. JavaScript is a programming language, but it's not anywhere near as difficult as the Java stuff we did. Having said that, it is a programming language. It does run in a browser, and it is very important to us because anything you want to do in Angular will be in JavaScript. Okay. So we discussed the purpose and use of JavaScript and its relationship with Java, how it's not really related. We describe how and when JavaScript can be used, and we're learning to program in JavaScript. We're going to discuss DOM. See, I actually put this from the back of it. See, it says discussed. I just copy and paste these, by the way. You hadn't figured that out. Discuss DOM as it relates to JavaScript. We're going to discuss it document object model. It's actually relatively simple. However, it's super uber important. So we'll get there. Explain several DOM objects, including their purpose, and then we'll discuss events. Events are where things happen. Events are where cool things happen. You don't think so? It is. And then we'll provide several examples. So today I'm just mostly going to talk about JavaScript. Might throw a little simple thing together for today, but next class is where I just do 15 demos or something like that. So exciting. What is Java? Oh, that reminds me. I do need a quick thing. So some of you might have heard me talking to a colleague the other day about an appointment. That appointment is 11/7. So I don't know how far away that is. So we're 10/24, right? It's 2 weeks away. I'll have to record that. I have a colonoscopy apparently, and I scheduled it for after class, but apparently the prep is the bad part. So we'll have to record that particular day. It's the only day I see recorded, except for already the day we already had, which was 11/21. That day is actually going to be recorded well in advance of 11/21 because you're going to want to use that in your project. So you're going to have some of these days down here, like developing applications that use sessions and sessions, you're going to have recorded, and you're going to get that recording sooner rather than later, so that because you can be able to use them in your what's called. And then the days in which we would have those, 11/21 obviously is Thanksgiving week, and nobody wants to come for Thanksgiving week. And 11/28, right? If I already give you the recording, right? What can you do? You can watch the video, but realistically, you could have already watched it and just take the day off, right? Because I'm going to give them to you before Thanksgiving week starts. Like I'm going to record them right around the time of 11/9, and then I'm going to make them available shortly after. Some of it won't make sense since we haven't done all of the Angular stuff, so you may need to wait till that. But as soon as you get the Angular concepts in 11/14, you can easily watch it. Do you know what I mean? And then you're all going to need sessions in your project, so it's very useful to do that. Advanced topics, I don't know what we'll actually cover, so I always like to have that padding there. And then web application security, I will do that usually in class because that's usually something, how do I describe this? It's important to discuss, sure, but it's also short. So I end up having time extra to talk about what you need to do for this and what you need to do for that, right? Yes. All right, you see these other days, 11/16, 11/30, those are no class days, right? That means you're going to schedule an appointment with me and we're just going to Zoom meet or meet in my office or whatever it is you want to do. Okay? Yes? All right. Okay, so that's the dates as we go forward. I'm sorry, I just remembered that and I was like, that's important to do. Did I actually close the JavaScript thing? Son of I feel weirdly full, even though I didn't eat anything this morning. I didn't even have a full cup of coffee. Uh, not even a full cup of coffee. So I feel like oddly full. I have no idea. JavaScript was designed to add interactivity to HTML pages. HTML pages were pretty bland, and so they wanted to add interactivity to it. Back in the day, like 95 to 2000, there were lots of different tools to provide interactivity to web pages. You might remember Flash, you might remember Java, you might remember lots of things, right? These were all coming out at the same time. JavaScript was designed to be much simpler and like run within a browser. Designed to be a scripting language, very lightweight. It wasn't really designed to move the world, but make a web page a little bit more interactive. Its interpreted language means that the scripts execute without preliminary compilation, so it's much easier to deal with. When we found the Java applets as an example, if somebody had a Java applet that was a version before your JVM, it literally wouldn't run, right? And there were all sorts of compatibility issues and those type of things, even with Java, right? Java is supposed to be one of those that was built for that, right? So there's still problems. Flash plugins and those things, you had to actually do something to get it in, right? JavaScript's designed just to run within a browser, and the browser has everything ready to go. Designed to be very simple. Everyone can use it without purchasing a license, which is important. What can it do? It makes web pages more static. It can be used to detect browser type. So let's say you want the browser type to be IE, and then if IE browsers, you show them a blue background. You can do that. People used to do shit like that. That's a real thing. Remember I told you that the browsers at some point started to deviate between their tags, right? So what you do is you detect the browser. I mean, you wouldn't actually make a color background, but you could if you wanted to. Almost always that's the test, right? Right, when you're testing to see if you can test the difference between Internet Explorer and Mozilla or Netscape Navigator in the day, you would just change the background, right? But if you wanted to make a certain tags display a certain way, and it would be different if it was in two different browsers, you detect the browser type and then you do it one way in one and one way in another. You could do that. You can put dynamic text on the page, depending on what somebody put. Somebody's doing something, you can have something show up. Right? This is actually a lot more important for the business world because now form validation, form checking became a lot richer with JavaScript than it did with any other tool. You're able to very quickly look at an HTML form and encounter if there's issues with it and deal with it there. It's very, very valuable for that. And we can also manipulate, read and write HTML elements. Put the last two together and you can form validate on the client side, which is huge because if you had to actually send a request to see if it was valid, you're actually putting a lot of work on the server instead of having all that on the client. Imagine you had 1 million people, right? Like one person using your website, that's not going to wear it out, but 1 million people and they're all submitting invalid stuff. Server's working its ass off. Let's make the clients do all that. And the server only handles valid requests, which is the basic idea. What's it used in practice? Current best practices validate form data nearly automatically. I'm going to show you a script tomorrow, not tomorrow, Wednesday, and you're going to see like you just copy that in your page and use it, and voila, right? It's that simple. You're like, wait a second, what? It's that simple. We're going to check all the form elements, and you'll see how to do that pretty easily, right? You can't check everything, right? It's not like Java, right? It's not like, you can check. I think the biggest problem is numbers. I think you can use a bunch of things to see if it's a number, but I don't think you can see if it's the right kind of number. Does that make sense? Like if it's a double or int. I can't remember, but we'll see that in real life pretty soon. This is what we do. Okay, Angular makes this so easy. Like we're gonna learn to do this in JavaScript, but Angular makes it even easier But you still are, we're going to learn the states in the meantime, right? Dirty. So dirty has a connotation that's quote unquote negative, I guess. But the real idea of dirty, or it's been around in computer science for 1,000,000 years. Dirty just means it's been modified, right? Pristine is it's opposite, not modified, right? So there are a few states that we remember those states. Then we can use forms. We can do all sorts of things with forms because it's not just we want to show an error, but not if it's pristine. Why? Before a user enters data, it's not valid, right? Once the user enters something in, that's when it becomes invalid. So anyway, we'll talk about that quite a bit. We're going to do the JavaScript version of it, but really we're just using it to learn the states. I have a pre-canned thing I'm going to show, and you guys can just use it at will. I think it's part of homework 3. Andrea's looking at me like, what? Might be, I don't remember. And it's used to manipulate or read-write cookies. This is a bad idea. So it's not a good idea if you're going to use a full stack web development. It's only useful if you have, you're going to use JavaScript for both ends. It's really not ideal to do. So we don't really do that. React to events, almost all of JavaScript is designed to do this. When I use JavaScript on a web page, even with Angular, I'm using it to react to events. To have an event, and when the event triggers, I want my JavaScript code to run. Most of what you do with JavaScript is that. Besides validating forms, you're reacting to browser or user events, right? User clicks something, mouse is over. I like to do a mouse over. You like mice? Right? I like mice. No, I don't. Scare the shit out of me. But anyway, the number one thing, if I did just form stuff, the number one things kids ask me to do is a mouse over. Like make an image change based on like if the mouse goes over it, right? So I just build that in now. Yeah, whatever. Java is generic programming language. It's a full-fledged one. It's not a scripting language. It does get compiled into bytecode, and then the bytecode is run in the JVM, so it's kind of like an intermediary thing. But JavaScript is a scripting language. It's really designed to interact with the browser. It's never designed to be compiled. JavaScript is officially named EMCA script. JavaScript got its name because Java was super duper popular. EMCA script. Oh. Would you use ECM? It sounds like a non-venereal disease. Yeah, that's the right word. Sounds like a BD, right? Oh man, I got an EMCA script, right? So they went with JavaScript because it was popular. So they wanted to essentially, hey, this other thing is popular. Let's use its name, and that was it. That's the name. That's the only real relationship between it. Now, good news. You ever take your programming language class seriously? You would know that this is really important. Java and JavaScript are both relatively form the C language. So a lot of that stuff that you use in Java is also in JavaScript. That does not mean they have the same stuff because they're both rooted from C, not from JavaScript doesn't come from Java, right? That's really important to remember. All right, how do I use it? You can embed it right into HTML by using script, type equals text / JavaScript, and then you could document.write, hello world. Ta-da! You know what? How many of you have seen a meme or something like that that makes fun of hello world? It's kind of funny. What did you learn to do in college? Hello world. But when you're trying out a new technology, what's a good way to figure out whether or not something's working? I hate to say this, I use it all the time. And I'll tell you why I use it all the time. Some things are hanky. You got to get this to work with this and work this with this and this and this. Document.write can go a long way. So anyway, but this, yeah, just this hello world. This is your hello world thing. Now, some people like JavaScript for the following reason. Look how simple it is. There's nothing, there's no, pre-packaging, there's no making sure you have libraries, there's no this, no that. You just get document.write, and it's going to write hello world on the page. That's why some people like Python. There's not a lot of things, until you get to try to do something fancy, right? So JavaScript, some browsers, some very old browsers might not understand it. So if the script tag is not understood, you can put it in an HTML comment. I'm going to point out something about the HTML comments. Now we've covered the CSS version and we've covered this one. These are really ancient browsers, but there's sometimes you have in organizations like say the Navy or certain types of banks or certain types of things where they might have relatively old computers using them. If that's the case, you might need to do things like this. Most of us will not, however. You're going to get a call from somebody and say, I can't do with this thing that I was supposed to do. And you're going to say, well, why not? And then you're going to look at a log and then sure enough, they're using some ancient thing. Anyway, JavaScript can also be inserted in the body or the head. So what we saw here is in the body, right? This is going to display as soon as the browser reads it, understands what it is, it's going to write hello world. That's how that works. But if you put it in the head, nothing happens. It won't do anything. And you go, what do you mean? The body is where things get displayed in an HTML page. And that's when the thing calls and does things. But this is when the script executes when the page is loading. But the head really doesn't ever get displayed. So the browser reads it and then processes the body. It's not designed to have execution at the time. We usually put functions and event handling things in there, and that get called by something in the body. Right? So functions go there, not actual code. Make sure you know that. Very important. Comments. Now we're going to look at it as a programming language. Comments, output, syntax comments, variables. Y'all are going to hate variables. And you go, what do you mean? So you guys don't like scalars and arrays, right? Y'all like to have nice, neat things. Oops. And then we have expression operators. Some of these things are really easy and really fast because they do all stem from the C language, and so some of it's very, very simple. So comments, single line, multi-line, that should look familiar for our Java programmers. Output, can you tell me, I'm gonna pick on Andrea. Can you tell me the difference between right and right line? It's not a trick question. Think about system.out.println. Am I saying that? I'm messing it out. System.out.println and versus system.out.println. What's the difference? Same thing. But what is the difference? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So one prints just the text. The other one prints a new line. That's it. The bad news is new line in HTML doesn't mean a new line in like what you call it. So we're gonna see this. I'm gonna show you an example of this. I have seen countless screw-ups that are they're trying to write something and they think that they go right and then they right line. It does not work that way. So, but yeah, it actually just creates a new line. But the new line in HTML is just a new line in the file, not like I'll do a demo. You will understand. JavaScript commands and names are case sensitive. Command lines end with a semicolon to separate it from the next command line. They refer to things as command line because it's interpreted. It reads. In some situations, the semicolon is optional. Semicolons are useful to make the code easy to follow and interpret. When I teach 150 now, guess what I do not do? I do not say when semicolons are optional. Do you know why? It's easier to teach someone to use them all the time than it is to tell them all the different spots. If I tell them to do it the first way, they never screw it up. Second way, they screw up all the time. Because you actually have to think more about, and it's just human nature. You have to actually think about the rules. But if you just use semicolons everywhere, Java loves that. You're fine. Right? And it's not because students are what you call it, it's just human nature. I don't If you ask me right now, and I'm a professor of computer science, associate professor, whatever. If you ask me right now to tell you what the rules are, where you can put a semicolon in Java, I probably would screw it up. You know why? How many things can you do at one time? How many things can you have in your mind at one time? It's limited. It's finite, and that's why I teach it that way. But yeah, just use semicolons everywhere. Don't worry about it. Name, location, and memories. The only time you might actually need to know when semicolons are optional or whatever is if you take one of those Java tests. They really get into the weeds, but like I've seen people pass those without actually being able to program, so kind of strange. But anyway, variables are name, location, and memories. Naming conventions, same they are in Java, keep it simple. Names are case sensitive. Declaring variables uses the var keyword. Var. What does var mean? Variable. That's it. No real type is specified. That's what I meant by scalar. So some programming languages have what's called a scalar. That just means a singular thing. It doesn't actually define a type. It lets you infer. If you need to use it as a string, it converts it to a string for you. Need to use it as a number, it converts it to a number. You know that's a problem, right? So JavaScript only supports 4 different types. Pretty simple. Numeric, numbers. You can add those together, that type of thing. Strings, hello, happy holidays. Michael Ruth is the best. Those type of things. See? I think you're all going to write it anyway. But Booleans, they accept one of 2 values, T or F. Null is a value that has no value at all. It's really, a null type isn't really a type as much as saying nothing's there. Does that make sense? It's a little weird to think about, but that is what null is. That's Java's version of it too, right? So, okay, what do we do? Just need to know the rules and keep it simple. What I always say, the best way to deal with JavaScript is to deal with it like it's a toddler. Keep your rules simple and stay in your line, right? What do you mean? So if you're using variables like willy-nilly all over the place, and you're not sure which one's an integer and which one's a string, you screwed up. Something bad's about to happen. But if you name things pretty well and you keep numbers separate from strings, you don't have these issues, right? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Treat it like a toddler. Simple rules. This is well defined for this, and this is well defined for this. Right? We don't drink out of the toilet as an example, right? Simple rules. If you find a bottle that's been under something for a little while, don't start breaking it. You will throw up. Rules, right? They're relatively simple, but just keep them straight, and it's so much easier. Your whole life will be better. All the familiar operators are here, and the precedents you're familiar with. Arithmetic operators are for numbers, but plus is for concatenated for strings. You're like, wait, what? It's just like Java. When you take 2 strings and you plus them together, what happens? You get 2 strings plus whatever's tacked on to the end, right? But if it's a number and you add 2 plus 4, what do you get? 2 plus 4 is 6. What are you doing? You said 10. Oh, I thought I said 10. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Yeah, like, what? Comparison operators are also there. But yeah, no. So, but what happens when you do, like, this is why I'm encouraging you to be careful. What happens when you, in Java, think about the rules in Java. So if you add 2 plus the word 4, what happens? It concatenates them, right? It becomes a string, and it concatenates them, right? It becomes 2, 4. Right? Same thing if you did 4, 2, right? Same thing. Yes? JavaScript doesn't care about types. So when you try to put, if you're looking for an integer and you did the 2 plus 4, it converts it to a string and then tries to put in an integer and then it says, no, you can't do that. JavaScript's like, also, there's some hanky stuff. Y'all are gonna love this later on. Yeah, JavaScript sucks. So I hate it so much. Anyway, there's this other thing that JavaScript does. If you have certain types of numbers, like the number 3, that converts to a 0 or a 1. If I remember, I think it's a 1 actually, right? Oops. Right? So there are all sorts of these things that happen in JavaScript that don't happen in compiled languages. Compiled languages have very, very hard rules about types. JavaScript does not. That's why when I say keep your things separate, make sure that you're aware of what everything is a type, then you won't have any issues. Branching and looping, branching if statements are all the same as they are for Java. Looping statements are also the same. For, while, do while are all included. Nothing special there. Function is a method defined by using the function keyword. We don't define our own objects in the sense that we're going to define an object, then you're going to do stuff with it, right? Well, later on, we'll define something called a data access object in JavaScript, in Angular when we do that. But all we do in that is define the types of things that are in there. Like I think a student has a string SID or whatever it was, or an integer SID, a name, major, and GPA, right? So int, string, double, right? Pretty simple. But there's no methods. You should never write a function for like thinking it's a method. You should always write a function that does something. Okay. That takes all the parameters and does whatever it needs. You actually have to write the word function. That is not on here for its own good. Function name, if you have parameters. This is weird the first time you see a function with parameters. When you see a JavaScript function for the first time, it's a little weird because you know how like you used to write int a comma int b? Right now it's just a b. It is weird. It is what it is. And then you put this, wrap that in semicolons, not semicolons, curly braces, and then you have the function body there. If you needed to call it with arguments, you just put the arguments bar1, bar2, whatever. Returning a value, just have a return in there. It's similar to what you do in Java, but you notice there's no change in the what we might have called the method signature, right? Still function, my function with no parameters. Yes. JavaScript is actually an object-oriented programming language. Everybody gets mad about that because we don't ever actually implement your own objects. In fact, you really should not at any point implement your own objects. It is embarrassingly hard to do. But what you guys are going to learn in next week or week 9, week 11, week 10, if you're in 372, is that all you need to be able to create ADTs, some version of polymorphism, and some version of inheritance. You get those 3 things, you're an object programming language. So anyway, you'll never actually implement your own. In fact, it's designed not to. However, there's some very important objects that we should know about that we might want to use. Some of which we'll talk about today and some of which we'll leave for another day. I almost never add anything else. I do the demo and we do the demo things that we do, and we rarely add new objects. I always just say leave some for another day in case like it comes up. Sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't. If it does, it does. So declaring a string variable var text equals my string. String has a property called length. Remember I told you we had 3 to 4 types? One of them was a string. String actually has a length. It returns the length of the string. But be careful, because if you call for the length of an integer, as an example, it may work. What happens if you call the string length of an integer? You might get like the number of characters in the thing, right? That's probably not what you wanted. You also have string methods like character add substring to lowercase. We're familiar with most of these, but be damn sure you have a string. It gets really wonky if you don't have a string. I'm not joking. When you have a string, it weirdly converts strings into numbers. It uses actually a set of rules that's actually pretty common, but it doesn't work the way you think it does. So make sure you have a string, Right. Because if you want to do these things, that's fine, no problem, but you're gonna want to have a string to do it. I do very little with them, by the way. I don't manipulate them too much. Date, math, and array. Math has utility functions for a variety of things. Date has to get manipulate dates. Array is invaluable. So you want to access a large number of multiple values in a single variable. It's an array. Everybody told you you had scalar and you had arrays. A scalar, a variable, is one thing. An array is the same variable with multiple things. Same idea. I'm sorry, Jan. No. So that is back-end stuff. If you made your integers into strings or however you did your whatever, some of it would have been easier if it was a string, right? Or was an integer, right? Right? Your validation stuff that we were doing for homework 3, that would be easier if some of that was an integer, right? But I showed you ways in which you could do it without it being an integer, right? Yeah, this has no effect on the homework 3 in that sense. But yeah, I would make sure when you think you have a string, you have a string. You think you have a number, treat it like a number always. Yes? I know that sounds stupid. Imagine you have 2 bottles. One has gasoline, the one has water or beer, because it kind of looks similar, right? There you go. One will kill you. One will kill you more slowly. Right? But making sure you know which bottle is which is the key to your survival. Right? Oh no, I should probably have said it this way because it's Halloween. I'll say it this way. So one has beer and one has gasoline in it, right? One will kill you and you won't have any fun, and the other will kill you with a little fun, right? So one will kill you, but you won't have any fun, and the other one will be a little fun. There you go. But anyway, but no, seriously, if you think about it like that, and really like making sure that this variable is always used as an integer, or this 90% of those issues are gone. Just gone, right? Nothing to worry about. Same thing with arrays. We'll talk about those at some point. DOM stands for the document object model. Now, what that actually is a hierarchy of objects, and it's designed to organize a document. What's in a document? Well, it depends. We got children, right? And then they have children, and they have children. So it's a very hierarchical series of things. However, we can cheat a lot of it, and you don't need to get very fancy. You can cheat a lot of it by using their sub objects, and then we can just grab, like, say, all the images on a page or all the form elements on the page, right? That's what we're actually using it for, not going actually to try to parse a web page. Because if we do that, we'll go blind, right? No, not really go blind, but you won't be happy, right? You will not be happy. I'm sorry. It is bad. I shouldn't have said blind, by the way. You're both wearing glasses today. Stepped in it again. Oh well, maybe I'll wear my glasses, and we'll all be in solidarity. We'll be in solidarity. By the way, that reminds me. We were at the zoo or whatever, and there were these brownie bites. And my kid has a peanut allergy, so I had to read the back of it. I was holding it like as far away as I could just to be able to read it because it was so small. It was pretty funny. So, but the DOM objects are really just a way of thinking about a document and the web document as a document. So we just get to cheat. The DOM object, the document obviously is the big whole thing that contains these other things. The window object refers to the browser window. We use that for sizing purposes. We want to see how big the window is. We want to do things with it. Screen is the most common way to get the size of the screen in case we want to manipulate the things in the page. We can do that. History, you want to look up somebody's browser history? No, not really, but you want to look at the last page, or you want to look at 2 pages ago or something. That's not important for some reason. I avoid doing that for the following reason, is if you're trying to manipulate the way someone's navigation is using that, it's often a terrible plan. If they visit that, it's the first time they visit the page, that's not there, right? And so it doesn't work as well as you might think it works. Location, this is pretty important. This contains information about the current URL, and guess what happens if we change it? No, you just go to the next page. It's as if they clicked on it. Do you want to send users to another page without warning them or letting them know? Probably not. But you could. Yes. I know Andrea's like, I can't wait to send Mike to another page. But anyway, no, we do use it to send users to various pages. That is pretty common. If they don't have some information they need to do something over here, or there's an error, we send them back to the previous page. You know, it's not, what you call it. It's also not considered annoying. Like it's not a pop-up window, right? Sometimes you have to send somebody to a new page, right? Like it's not like, you know. HTML element loaded into a browser window is a document object, provides access to all HTML elements in the page. From this class, we can get all the images, forms, links, etc. It's a bit easier if we name and ID things. If we ID things, we can get things by ID and just grab whatever we want. I'm serious, like just grab it as an ID. If it's the only ID, if it's the only thing in that document with that ID, grabs it, gives you instant access to it. Very, very easy. So document attributes, we have 4 collections that are important. Links, all the links in a page. Be careful about this. This sounds stupid, but you go get all the links. That literally contains all the links in the page. Sometimes you might be looking for 1 or 2 of them or whatever. I've never seen this work out well. Take that how you want it. Images does the same thing though, but 90% of the time, the images array, we can configure it, we can fool around with it, we can get to the images and change the source and things like that. So it's not too hard. Images gives us a good reason to do it. Links, what you're doing is going to change the value of links. When you think about reading, okay, but why would you want to read a link, right? You're really trying to change some value, right? So if you're trying to change a link, then the user would just click on something, go somewhere different based on, I mean, yeah, okay, it's important, but it's also less important than maybe changing images the way around. Anchors are links that go to the same, so different places in the same page, right? Didn't know that, now you know. And then forms, we always use forms because you go in and get all the, there's usually only one form on a website. So you grab the form in question and then boom. Additionally, if you have links that have IDs or images that have IDs or forms that have IDs, you can just go and grab the form using these guys. You'll see me do that, both for the images as well as the forms. I don't really screw around with links because I think it's stupid, so I'm not doing it. Stupid, I'm not doing it. We don't do anchors, so I don't do anything like that. But you'll see me do images and forms. We'll have a validation example. We also have something called get element by name. Remember I told you you can name things? Well, with forms, you have to name everything with a name. It's always there. But because JavaScript allows us to use IDs, we can use that instead. So I almost always use IDs because it makes a lot of what you're going to do easier. Angular won't care, but I almost always use JavaScript IDs because if I want to get a form, I can go forms, boom, and then I get all the things in a form. By the way, right from that, right? But if I want to get something specific in a page, maybe I want to make one image change, as an example. If I give it an ID, I don't have to worry about something else having a similar name or anything like that. It's valuable to do. So get element by ID is pretty valuable. You'll see me do both of those. Events are actions that can be detected by JavaScript, and JavaScript can view the browser and the page. Lots of involved events. Events are used in combination with functions. Yay. Now, it says normally used. What does normally mean? Most of the time, which also means not all the time, which means there must be a way to not use functions. Yes, there is. I'm not even gonna bother teaching it to you. It's actually epically bad practice, right? It's usually much easier just to call a method function than actually have JavaScript code in the event. But could you? Yes. Should you? Yeah. There are a ton of events, but we're going to look at a couple. The ones that everybody wants to see are on click or click, on mouse over, on what you call it. When we get into HTML page and you type an attribute, like a button as an example, you actually get to see them because NetBeans has autocomplete, and so you can see the actual list. We're going to use the JavaScript tutorial. I'm going to show you that as well today. And so you can look at all the events. Don't go crazy. Most people just use one or two of them, right? But on click, mouse over, mouse out, these are all things you can do. Yes. Keyboard movements, key press, key up. And you can actually, I think you can actually detect which key was down. So if you wanted to create a game, for example, where, you know, you were looking for somebody to press up to move something, you could. Don't. So many better ways to do that, but you could. And documents, browser events like submit, load. You can have just about anything, right? Like somebody presses a reset button, boom. Somebody does anything with a form. Somebody clicks in a form. No longer pristine. Somebody's clicking in it. That's the type of thing you can detect. Anything anyone something can do with a form or can do with a page is the type of thing you can do. Now with forms, it gets really rich. However, what do we want to do? Computer science, one of the things we beat up on you guys a lot about is we say kiss a lot. Why do we say kiss a lot? Just keep it simple, right? Now I'm going to add the stupid, but I want to tell you why. If you don't keep it simple, you're going to find an error in your code and you're going to feel, right? I remember a kid came in my office one day, it was like 150, and he said, look, I think I have it right. I mean, I have like what you have. And so all I did was read his code to him, and he goes, that's not what it's supposed to do. That's what it's doing. So just keep it simple, and everything is easier. We don't also need to know all the events because you don't need to use all the events. Angular also has that same framework, so you're going to use a different series of things when you use Angular. So don't want to spend too much time. We have two ways of assigning events, and we use both of them interchangeably. But I'm only going to ever use inline just because we don't have that much time. Sorry, I mean, we really don't. I don't really have that much time to spend. So we're going to use inline a lot. On click, if somebody clicks this button, it's going to call this function. Ta-da! Exciting, right? Maybe it is. Who knows? DOM, document get element by ID, it's going to add the onClick, it's going to add the function display date to the onClick event. See how complicated this is? Yes? But in situations where you have a button that does more than one thing at different times, you might actually need to reassign functions, which is why you can do this. However, it's a pain in my patoots. Is it doable? Yes. Stick with the inline, it's just easier. So now we have the third W3 schools, and I will be going over a tutorial. I actually went and go too fast, but I did go a little fast. But and it's just another JavaScript tutorial, right? It's another tutorial. We don't have the capacity to go over everything. I want to go over enough. The reason why we're doing this for 2 days and not for the 1 day is because Angular uses JavaScript. So you have to have the basics of how to program. And that really is mostly, it's more important that you understand how to do libs and if statements. Oh, and then we also learn, we can spend a few minutes learning about falsy. Do you know what falsy is? Or truthy? Truthiness? No. Do you think I'm messing with you?
No.
Okay. Because you do look like you're full of shit face, right? Like you're like waiting for me to tell you a joke, but no, it's called truthing. Oops, that one's Addy. Um, but this is expression, right? An expression is a statement that produces a value. A conditional is an expression that evaluates a true or false. Truthy values are considered true when encountered in a Boolean context. So Java doesn't do this. Java says you got to use true or false. They have to value a relationship operator and it has to evaluate to true or false, right? You can't use the string as a Boolean operator, right? Can't use the integer, can't use it, just use a value, right? JavaScript has mix and match types, right? The most important one was you have strings, you have numbers, and true Boolean. That last one doesn't seem to be that important. But holy shit, it causes chaos. Because what happens is you can use any value, anything, inside of a conditional expression. Anything goes. But that means we'd have to know the rules. It makes us sad. So truthy values in JavaScript is a value that's considered true when encountered, and falsy is one that's would be false in that context. So this is all you need to look at. It's really pretty simple. Okay. The following values are considered false. False. Okay. That's true or false, you shithead. Don't start with that one, right? I get that, right? That's obvious. 0 is false. What about -0? Also false. I can't read that. Oh, it's an empty string. Also false. What about null? False. What about undefined? False. What about not a number? Also false. Come on, man. All right, so let's talk about this for a second, just so we're aware, okay? Anything that doesn't have a value, null, undefined, right? Undefined means the variable isn't even freaking defined. Nowhere in there is that variable, right? So usually means you misspelled something. Yes? 90% of it is you misspelled a variable, right? If you're using var apple and you look later for var apple with an uppercase A, that was never defined. And so it's undefined. It's not null, right? There's no compilation step, so we can't find these errors immediately, right? It's not null, it's considered undefined. If you have var apple and later on you try to use it, it's still null, right? It's defined, but it doesn't have a value, so it's what's called, right? Then what happens when you do something like divide 1 by 0? You get not a number. This happens in Java. You get not a number values in Java, right? Nan doesn't like that. That's what my instructor used to say. That's how you remember not a number. Nan doesn't like that, right? Like anyway. Like whatever. I feel like I'm explaining the joke, so I'm not even getting a half a smile out of this. I'm like, oh my god! Like at least pretend that you understand the joke, so I will move on. Because I will get you to laugh by making fun of the joke that I just told, by continuing to explain it. That always gets a laugh. Anyway, so things like not a number, things you can't use, those are all going to be false. 0 and an empty string are the other two that you have to remember. What do you mean? Well, when you look at the 4 different types, right? You get null and undefined is kind of more like null. So whatever, you get those two. Then the other ones come from the other two, right? You got false, obviously, right? Which is basic. We knew we got that. But each of the other types, right? A numeric type and a string type both have a false value. And those are empty strings or 0 of any form. So be aware. where. This also is important in Angular. It's the same, it's JavaScript, so it's the same thing. Conditionals, just think about the most important thing to do. Remember I told you about the gasoline and the beer. I probably shouldn't have used that explanation, by the way, but whatever. Think about it like that. You can't see in the jar, right? Can't see in the jar. So what do you have to do? You have to, come on, man. You have to remember which one's which. Label it, right? And you name variables and keep the variables separate. Yes? One's for drinking and one's putting in your car. Right? Yes? Yes. I know that sounds crazy. All right, so I have some other things I want to point out real briefly before we move on. So these are considered falsy, right? So they're false. What happens if I, the number 12? It would evaluate to truthy or true. It evaluates to true. What if I had the number 12? The letter, the word spelled out 12, TWE, whatever, right? That's also going to evaluate to true. Yes. Bad idea. Yes. Be cautious. Yes. Also, if you're trying to use it, I didn't get into this because I don't want to, but if you're trying to use a string in a number context, it does weird stuff. So I don't want to get into the rules because I could, but hey, just remember the gasoline and the beer analogy will be fine. Yes? Well, what's another one? No, lemonade. Lemonade's good. Yeah, there you go. Lemonade and gasoline, right? All you have to do is look for the ones with suds, right? That's why I use beer, because it literally looks, if you've seen a couple of them together, they look pretty similar. And no, it won't kill you if you just have a sip. Now, there's one other one I want to talk about. What if you have a string 0? Be cautious. It's not an empty string.
Well, it kind of contradicts itself. Kind of weird.
It's not, because it follows the rules as defined.
Okay, it's like.
It doesn't follow the spirit,
Yeah.
which I would agree, but these are the things we looked at. Also, arrays that have empty length would also be what you call it. False in parentheses, and what you call it is not an empty string. You get some weird stuff. And there's actually more than that. But the other thing I want to say too was if it's not one of these things, it's not falsy, it's true. So, but like I said, the gasoline analogy is actually super useful. And it should be in here. Nope, or it's not listed on its own. But I assure you it is somewhere. Comparisons. Yeah, we're gonna go over these on what you call it. They're really nothing special. But I like this because you can actually try it and run it. Like you can click try it. Then you can change JavaScript here and then see what it does. It's really useful to pull snippets of your code out. And yeah, the other thing is too, is, and this might sound stupid, is that if you had something more complicated, like something in the head and those things, that would totally work. Right? You can copy your web page in here. Your images aren't going to show up, sure, but like you can copy your whole web page in here and then test the various elements. We'll talk about that a little bit more next class in terms of troubleshooting and so forth. But I want to end a few minutes early because I want to talk a little bit about the project designs thing, which is going to come up. So let me finish and wrap up here. We're going to discuss the purpose and current use of JavaScript and its relationship with Java. It doesn't really relate to Java, not in any real way. They both come, they got their tooling, they got their name, they got their expressions, conditionals, and they got their mathematical operators from C, which is similar to Java. So that seems like they're alike, but in places where they're alike, they're probably further apart than you think they are. Describe how and where JavaScript can be used. We're going to use it a bunch. We're almost always going to use it functions or we'll do a variety of things just to show you what it looks like. Because you can actually write some pretty complicated things in JavaScript if you choose to do so. I had a pick'em thing where, it picks against the spread. And then you can see, like, you pick against the spread, and then you go onto this website to do a what if analysis, right? And then you select the outcomes of all the games, and it would tell you how you'd actually, it would tell you how you did, right? How, would you rank first or second or whatever, right? Um, Fancy JavaScript, right? That's all it is, fancy JavaScript. But you can get really fancy, but 90% of you are not. Very simple stuff. Because we're going to use Angular. Once we get to Angular validation, y'all are going to be annoyed at how easy that is in relative terms. You're like, nah. Like, no, seriously, it's going to be very easy. We discussed the fundamentals of programming in JavaScript. If we need to validate something specifically, like we need to check to see if a string is like, we have a choice of 4 things, you might still need to write JavaScript to make that happen. So it's not like you can just totally avoid it, but you do need to know enough about programming in JavaScript for you to do the Angular stuff. We discussed DOM as it relates to JavaScript and its use in manipulating web pages. We explained several DOM objects, including their purpose. We discussed events. Events are going to be very important for us. And provided examples. I didn't do a lot of JavaScript programming today. I'm going to do it all. So typically I finish it early and then I do a little JavaScript programming just to get people's feet wet. And then we come back and I do a lot more. Not doing it today because I want to talk a little bit about your project design review, which this is in the document. There's nothing I'm changing here, but I want you to be aware. These are the project requirements, right? I don't want you to just simply answer each one of these questions on how you plan to do it, right? Don't do that because you have to support 3 types of users. That I want you to explain how you're going to use the 3 types of users. But application persistence must be managed. Oh, you have to do that. That's not how you're going to do it. You have to do it. I know how you're going to do that. Application must use Spring Boot. I know you're going to do that. Validation on the client server side. I know you're going to do that. You don't have to tell me. You're going to have forms in your web page, and then you're going to have them validated. No shit, right? But you are going to have to define how you're going to use the 3 users, right? We talked about, maybe you have a casual user, maybe you have a logged in user, and you have to have maybe a management user. Each user should be able to do their own thing, right? So it's not just logged in and says, hello, user, and that's all you get, right? They should be able to have different functionality. So our student website, we're going to have advisors. We're going to attach advisors to the students. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's what we're going to do. And the advisors will be able to look at all their students. Yes, only their students that they advise. Then we'll have a supervisor view that can not only look at every student, can actually look at the advisors, right? Can manage the advisors, can create advisors and do things with advisors, right? That's what we're talking about, okay? So that needs to be explained. What's really important, and it seems a little overlooked because it's down below, is so Angular, you've got to use it. It's not optional, right? It's not optional to use it. So don't go and say I'm going to use Angular Remedy, right? Because it's a 5-minute thing. You will literally lose massive points if you use something other than Angular, right? But what you really need to do is what pages will be required, right? Think about how you want your page to work and how you want your work to flow. What does a logged in user do? What does a whatchamacallit user do? Think about it like that. And that should be relatively easy to do. Really important though, at the same time, as you're doing it, think about what your data requirements are. You can even write it in SQL form. Should be relatively easy. Users are username and passwords, and then whatever additional information, right? If you have a 2-tiered user that's logged in, like a manager user, like a manager and like a supervisor, like we're gonna have, you're just gonna have a supervisor boolean, right? I mean, that's all it is, right? You might do other things depending on what it is that you're doing with your application. Somebody was doing a matchmaking application, so if you have users come in at maybe a matchmaker comes in and sets up people in matches, right? curates whatever, I'm making it up. And then a supervisor comes in and can look at everything, including who can log in as a matchmaker and who cannot, right? As an example. So whatever your application is, whatever it looks like, that's what you really need to focus on. What it's going to do, how it's going to work, that type of stuff, right? Your design review. That's the only real chance I have to see if you're actually trying or going to finish something that will look like it needs to look like or not, right? But here's the dilemma is generally speaking, when you think about what the users are going to do, you should also be thinking about what data they need to do whatever they need to do. So matchmaking thing is like, I think it's like a Bumble clone. It's one of the persons was doing like a Bumble clone, and one's doing like a Mincer thing. I think I don't remember. I'm old. I don't remember things. But you know, I joke because I can remember quite a bit, but just can't remember this right now. But anyway, the point is that you know, for matchmaking stuff, you need to think about all the stuff you're going to match on, right? Whatever that looks like, your users and so forth, and whatever you're going to match on. And then you have to think about an algorithm that actually does the matches or whatever. But you need things to match on, right? So that's pretty obvious. The users are always going to be username and password, and then some additional information, right? Some of you might have comments. That's going to need the blog posts or whatever, and it's going to need the comments to go with it, right? So you need to think about your data elements before you get beyond the, hey, my website's going to do this. But focus on my website's going to do this, not that stuff above. You need to tell me how you're going to do the 3 users, but that's really the only requirement you really need to go into. You're all going to use Angular in the front end. You're all going to use Spring in the front end, on the back end. That's going to happen. Yes? And then you might see a word in there if you're reading along later on. I don't know where it is. I'm sorry. I don't have it in there. Where you can transpile your code to turn in, but you better have the Angular stuff too, right? For demo purposes, I don't care what you do, but I need the actual code, right? So we'll talk about what that is. We actually take the Angular stuff and it gets what's called transpile. It's just translated into JavaScript code. So, I mean, that's all it is. It's not what's called, but that's all it is. But yeah, what pages will require, what will the flow look like? When you say you're going to support 3 users, what are you going to have them do? Yes. Use my knowledge of how websites already work. Use your knowledge of how websites already work, right? You're going to do like a selling website. Amazon's right there. If you're going to do you can do an eBay clone. eBay is right there. Yes, it's not. What's the word? You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't have to reinvent some brand new thing that nobody's ever seen before. It's great if you do, but I wouldn't demo it to all your fellow classmates that could probably do the same thing you just did, right? So, because they might just steal your idea. It's happened. It does happen. So, imagine Facebook founder actually demoed his idea in class. Imagine that if he did, right? That's $1 billion thing, right? So probably won't do that, but I do want to see the data requirements. You should be thinking about that early. A lot of your flow is just going to be managing those data items. When you think about having a form, what's going to be in the form? Can't tell you unless you know what's in the data items. I would actually think about putting my tables together first, then think managing, how do we manage these things? Yes, because that'll tell you how to manage everything. Yep. Yes, we good? We feel we understand this? It's due on October 31st. I'll be wearing a costume. I'm not telling you, but I am going to be wearing a costume. It'll be fun. Yes, I plan to bring in some treat that day. That treat I'm going to try to bring in. If I don't bring something in, I'm going to hit up CPS on the way in. You know why? Who's going to say no to candy? So my wife bought a bunch of candy this week. And we're gonna wrap up here, but my wife bought a bunch of candy this week, like several bags of candy, but like targeted candy, which is unusual for Halloween, right? Like Reese's Pizzas, and Reese's Pumpkins, and things like that, right? And the M&Ms, right? And peanut butter M&Ms, like little packs, like the snack. Well, I don't know what they call it, like not the snack size, but the little size, right? Like the handout can size. Uh, and so I was all excited. I was like, ooh, does this mean we get special candy? And she's like, no, this is for my work. It's like, my friend has a candy bowl. I rate it, so I gotta help her rate. I was like, no, you're a good friend. That's fine. Um, but whatever. They go chat and then she raids the candy bowl. So somebody told me if I wanted more students to come in my office, all I had to do was get a bowl and put candy in it. Would that help? Think maybe. Nobody even gets close to my office to even get a what you call it. So, all right. Anyway, that's class today. The demo is gonna be very demo heavy on Wednesday. I'm gonna come in and just demo. I also, weirdly, I have over the years have developed a predefined set of JavaScript, and I just stick to it. In other words, you'll see me have already developed stuff, and I'll add to it, subtract to it, whatever, because allows me to do more at once. Yes. Okay. So anyway, huh?
Very good.
Yes. I won't always have that. Most of the time I'll actually be doing code in person. But I will do it in the JavaScript stuff because some of it gets a little hanky, like remember naming things and so forth. Also, I tend to forget things. Not perfect. So, all right, we're gonna end a little bit early today. Y'all have a great